Welcome. Welcome to this week's episode of Christians Against Christian Nationalism. That might sound like an odd thing, Christians arguing with other Christians, although we've been doing that since it all started, right? But in these days, we really need to pay attention to this rise of Christian nationalism that's going on. And it's certainly not the Christianity that Jesus taught. So we need to be aware of um, finding ways to get the message out there that if you've retained the name Christian, and I know many people have not, but we still need to let people know that what they're hearing from a lot of these people who profess to be Christian really is not the same as what we're talking about. So for an example, I saw an interview with, of all people, Kid Rock. And the interviewer was asking him what he was going to go as for Halloween. And here he is. I'm going to find the um, screen share. A second. Here he is with his Jesus hat on. Come on. Here he is with his Jesus hat on, being interviewed. You can see the Jesus name Jesus inside the fish, ancient Christian symbol. Um, the fish is an ancient symbol of Christianity. But in response to what he was asked, what he was going to go as for Halloween, he told the interviewer, and I can't say what he said, but I can say that the word, what he was going, the word begins with an R. And it connotes someone who is mentally challenged. It's a word that thankfully fell out of use many years ago. But this is what he was going to go trick-or-treating as. I don't know if he was going to wear his Jesus hat at the same time, but whether he did or didn't is irrelevant. Here's another picture, maybe a little bit clearer of his hat, his lovely hat. Um, I mean, to have this juxtaposition of this hat with Jesus on it, and someone who professes to be a follower of Jesus, but then uses a word that is so offensive, what should be offensive to all of us. And so I was thinking about this as I read the gospel for this past Sunday. And it's the story of, and it's in Luke's gospel, it's the story of Jesus' it's a trip to Jericho, the city of Jericho. So Jesus is traveling through Jericho, and as he's going, he he becomes aware of a man named Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus. Now Zacchaeus was a rich man. He was very wealthy. He was the chief tax collector, and at this point you would hear the crowd booing and hissing, right? But Zacchaeus was intrigued by Jesus, and he wanted to know more. He wanted to see Jesus, but he was having a really hard time because he was short and he couldn't see above the crowd. So he ran ahead, found a tree, climbed up in the tree so that he could see Jesus. When Jesus came along the route, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus up in a tree and said to him, come down here. Come down here. Um, I am going to stay at your house today. Now, Zacchaeus was delighted, but all the people around were grumbling about it because they're saying he's going to a sinner's house for dinner. It didn't go over well. But Zacchaeus surprisingly says, "Here and now, I will give half of my belongings to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone, I will repay them fourfold." Jesus then said to Zacchaeus, "Today salvation has come to your house, For this is what it means to be a descendant of Abraham and Sarah. The promised one has come to search out and save what was lost. Now, why did this story remind me of Kid Rock? Well, Zacchaeus was a little man. Kid Rock isn't short, he's 6 feet or something, but in a lot of ways, he is small. He's a small man. And when I think of Zacchaeus, he was in a profession that he hated. He cheated people. He wasn't a good guy, but he wanted to see Jesus. There was something that was drawing him to Jesus. And when Zacchaeus saw Jesus, Jesus saw Zacchaeus. And not only did he tell him to come down, he wanted to see him better. He actually invited himself to Zacchaeus's house for dinner. And however that encounter happened, whatever emotion or whatever went on between these two, something happened to Zacchaeus. Somehow he was transformed. And he told Jesus he was going to give away a lot of his wealth. And for anybody that he cheated, he was going to repay not just what he had taken, but 4 times that. This was a major, big deal for a man like Zacchaeus to do. He went from a cheating tax collector to a follower of Jesus. Now, how did that happen? Well, that's what's supposed to happen, actually, when we become a follower of Jesus, when there's supposed to be some kind of transformation that then translates into how we go about in the world, in our work, in our families, in every aspect of our lives, even how we vote. So when I think about Kid Rock, for instance, he can wear his Jesus hat all he wants, but when he goes around saying words like he said, well, there's a dissonance there. There's a disconnect. It's not unlike those who wear a cross all the time. Let me find another picture here, if I can get her, if I can find her. Here she is, Carolyn Levitt. I'm going to get Mike up here too while I'm at it. So, um, you've seen many people, especially in this administration, wearing their crosses all the time. Carolyn Levitt often wears a cross. She professes to be a a Christian. Um, I don't wear a cross very often. It's been co-opted by people who have changed or co-opted the meaning of Jesus, the meaning of the cross. I do have this one. It was made by a friend of mine. It's a shell actually, and has a little, if you can see it, has a little cross in the middle. So I do have that. I haven't given up on being a Christian or in considering the cross to be an important symbol. But it gets difficult sometimes. So here we have Carolyn Levitt wearing her cross. And I'll be honest, she lies. She lies all the time in service to the administration, which tells its own lies. So the disconnect with her cross, and with her behavior, and the lies are lies that can be easily proven to be wrong. Can find out, anybody who wants to find out the truth can find it. But if we rely on her for the truth, we're going to be disappointed. And then there's Mike Lindell, the pillow guy. Um, he always wears a cross as well. In fact, you can buy a copy of his cross, $199, I think, although it's on sale. It's on sale now. The cross that he always wears. And he too is a liar. He was sued and he lost the case where he was accused of lying about um, voting machines being wrong, or about the 2020 election. being stolen. Um, he um, but he wears his cross, considers himself to be a Christian. There's that disconnect again. Well, in the Kid Rock interview, I was fascinated by this. In the Kid Rock interview, I kept reading because I wanted to hear what he had to say about Jesus, about being a Christian. And what it turns out that he said was pretty simple, one word: forgiveness. Yeah, yeah, that's all right. Yay for you. Um, that is a big part of being a follower of Jesus, is our forgiveness and acceptance of us in spite of the things that we have done wrong in our lives. So Kid Rock is talking about forgiveness, and he evidently believes that Jesus has enabled him to receive forgiveness for whatever. Well, that's great. But you know what? That's only about him. It's only about him. Zacchaeus, on the other hand, when he had his moment with Jesus, he was not talking about himself, although it certainly did involve himself, but he talked about what he was going to do for others, about now what his mission in the world would be. And it was obvious that he was changed. There was something different. He could not go back to the way he used to be. So we can take our faith, our understanding of Jesus, our understandings of the divine, however we want to think about that, as being there for me. For me personally, yes, that is part of it. But the idea is that being there for me is supposed to create a transformation into a new way of life. You probably know the saying from Matthew: by their fruits you will know them. By their fruits you will know them. This Rachel Maddow says this all the time about Donald Trump. Don't pay attention to what he says, pay attention to what he does. And that holds for this too. By their fruits you will know them. Not that it's our fruits or our good works or anything like that that makes us good. I mean, that's like putting the cart before the horse. Um, the right way to understand how truly blessed we are and forgiven, that we are cherished, that we are beloved, as we understand that, then we will naturally want to take that, our new selves, out into the world to others. That's the difference. That's the difference between these two ways. And I don't see a lot of that with Kid Rock, with Carolyn Levitt, with Mike Lindell, and all the others who get on TV with their little crosses on. Um, but this is what we want to look for when someone says, I'm a Christian. What are they doing about it? How are they working in the world? How are they treating other people? How are they working for justice in the world? Because that's what you read about in the Bible, right? That's what the Old Testament prophets were all about, was about justice. They were not predictors of the future. They were um, they were ones who confronted the king or other officials, government officials, to tell them what they were doing wrong in God's eyes. That's who they were. They wanted to know how these officials were going to rule in a way that brought about justice, especially for the most vulnerable, for the least of these. They were all about calling governments into account. And Jesus was certainly a lot of times poking his finger in the eye of the Roman Empire. He knew the Old Testament prophets very well. He inherited, in fact, his mission statement that he talked about at the beginning of his ministry came right out of the Old Testament prophets. I've come to bring good news to the poor, bind up the brokenhearted, all of feed the hungry, clothe the naked, all of those things. That's what Jesus was about. So whether you call yourself a Christian or not, that's fine. You don't need to call yourself a Christian. Um, but when you watch the news and you see Carolyn or Mike or Kid Rock with their crosses or their Jesus hat or any of the others, find out what they're doing for the world, especially for the least of these. And can we call that Christian? Because by their fruits, you will know them.